Lito Villanueva, the man steering the Philippines Fintech push, joins us to explain the bold 80 by 80 plan, the fraud-busting bureau, and how banks and startups are rewriting how Filipinos pay, save, and borrow. Real numbers, real risks, real hopes as the country leaps into fintech.
Yung fintech, it involves payments, investments, savings, insurance at loans. At kaakibat ng ating gobyerno at ng ating private sector para matulungan pa natin ang ating mga namumuhunan sa ating bansa.
We are now open for business.
It is a signal to the world. We are open for business.
In this episode, we go inside the transformation of Philippine finance from pay later apps to national payment trails. The country is racing to make digital finance the default for millions while defending users from faster, smarter scams. Our guest tonight is leading that effort from the private sector, championing industry self-regulation, advising the government, and building bank-grade fintech products that reach the unbanked. Expect a conversation that moves fast from policy to product and from impact to accountability. Lito Villanueva is Executive Vice President and Chief Innovation and Inclusion Officer of Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation and founding chairman of Fintech Alliance.PH, the industry body behind the Manila Tech Summit and the Philippines Fintech Coalition. He's been a visible champion of the 80 by 80 digital inclusion vision, the Fintech Alliance 40 framework, and has been leading industry initiatives on fraud prevention, eKYC registries, and international fintech showcases. Today, he is joining us to translate big policy ideas into practical steps for Filipino consumers, MSMEs, and the banking system. Welcome to Open for Business, Lito. How are you? That was a mouthful.
Thank you so much for having me, Cesar.
And of course, you have many awards. And of course, the latest news was with the President during the Tech Summit. How was the Tech Summit so far?
Yes, in fact, Cesar, again, thank you so much for having me. Greetings to all your avid viewers and followers. And I think one of the things that I would want to really highlight, the Manila Tech Summit is really a showcase of how Philippines is insofar as championing inclusive digital finance. And we are grateful to President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. for having delivered the opening keynote during that event. In fact, when I met the President, that was my first time to even meet the President in person.
Okay.
Remember that government suspended government work in the classes, right? Because of supposedly typhoon, di ba? The first words that the President mentioned upon seeing me, upon shaking my hand was, you know, Lito, I had to cancel all my engagements for the day except this one. And so I think that gives that particular event so much weight insofar as the relevance or importance of digitalization in the agenda of the current administration. So I think given that, in fact, we were only expecting about 500 attendees, 1,300 C-level executives showed up. So we even had to commandeer another ballroom, which was the Bonifacio Hall of Shangri-La Fort, to accommodate the spillover. It's no joke for us to be able to have the President himself in person during an event. So I think that really gave us so much impact insofar as having to really relay the message to the Filipino people. And I like your opening statement about having to further digest all of these initiatives that we have been telling the public and sharing with the administration. This is how we envision having to have a public-private partnership in having to really not just concretize the policies as well as on how we could really implement it and how we could transform all of these innovations into inclusion and how we could convert these policies into action.
Wow, exciting, Lito. And with that event and with that video, you were again at the radar of Open for Business. Before we go into the more complicated questions, because we want you to laymanize it, because a lot of people are also talking about it. Maybe let's start with the basics. Pag sinabi bang Fintech, ano ba yung Fintech? A lot of people don't even realize that if they are using their e-wallets, that in itself is Fintech. But in a nutshell, paano ba mas maiintindihan ng small businesses at mga karaniwang mamamayan what Fintech is all about? What does it encompass?
Actually, Cesar, maganda yung tanong mo, no? Especially sa ating mga viewers ngayon, no? Dahil alam natin na yung especially with the government's push for digitalization or yung digital payments, no? We are the partner of BSP, no? Insofar as having to ensure that all the players in the industry would have that unified stance in having to support the government. Ito yung programa nila ng Digital Payments Transformation Roadmap. So yung tanong mo, paano nakakaiba yung fintech na yan? Ano bang benepisyo sa publiko or sa mga MSMEs natin? In fact, kung maalala nyo, ang digital payments po ay nandiyan na yan matagal na. No? Year 2000 pa yan.
Yes.
Meron na tayong smart money, may GCash na, etc. Ang adoption that time, napaka-konti lang. No? Pero nag-boom talaga siya noong nagkaroon na ng interoperability sa payments na kung saan pinangunahan ng BSP itong tinatawag na nating National Retail Payment System o NRPS. Ito na yung pumasok yung InstaPay at PesoNet. No? So kumbaga, kahit saan mang bangko or e-wallet meron ka, pwede ka nang mag-transfer kung saan mang bangko or whatever e-wallet. So, lalo pang nabigyan ng diin o ng importansya ang mga InstaPay at PesoNet trails na to noong pumasok ang COVID, noong kasagsagan ng COVID. Nakita natin na dahil may lockdown, dahil limitado na yung galaw ng mga Pilipino na nakakonfine sila sa kanilang mga bahay at yung mga negosyante naman, ganun din, nasa bahay din nila, ay patuloy pa rin yung komersyo, no? Yung transfers o yung mga payments na ginagawa natin. So, lalo pang napaigting yung paggamit, no? ng mga digital payments na ito. Kaya kahit na nawala na yung COVID, kahit na back to normal na tayo, sabi nga natin dati, this is the new normal. And now we're back to our real normal, but on steroids. No? Akala natin na after COVID, yung paggamit ng digital payments ay lalamya or hindi na magagamit uli or kukonti yung gumagamit. Lalo pang nakita natin na dumoble, ang triple pa nga, ang paggamit. No? So, yung convenience, yung security, at yung reliability ng digital payments ay nandoon. Kaya na dito ang Fintech Alliance, ang ating mga kasama sa industriya, ay para naman maprotektahan din ang interes ng ating mga consumers. Ito yung sabi nating consumer protection against yung mga cybercrime, mga fraud, na panloloko ng mga cybercriminals. Kasi, alam mo, Cesar, while kami sa industry ay mga competitors, di ba, sa mga bangko o sa mga e-wallets, kami ay united when it comes to having to combat fraud. We share data or information when it comes to how to prevent cybercrime or how to prevent fraud and how to even protect our consumers. Because if there's one thing that we are really protecting, no, with our lives, no, with our commitment to the public, that is what we call trust. Because alam mo, pag nawala yung tiwala ng publiko sa ating digital payments o digital platforms, wala nang gagamit. No? Kaya nakita naman natin kung ano ang importansya ng digital, ano importansya ng technology, yung 40 framework natin, yung ating mga 80 by 80 agenda, ito ay inilatag natin ng panahon ng Manila Tech Summit. At narinig din ng Presidente, ng ating Pangulo, ang commitment ng private sector, zero tolerance policy on the misuse of digital payment platforms, especially by illegal businesses, plus the online gambling operators, no, na mga illegal na negosyo na hindi naman talaga dapat nandoon. That's why, sabi nga natin, ang digital payments ay kaakibat ng progreso ng bansa at kaakibat ng ating gobyerno at ng ating private sector para matulungan pa natin ang ating mga namumuhunan sa ating bansa. Yung fintech, hindi lang ito na lilimitahan o masyadong limitado sa pag-uusapan nating payments. No? Alam, meron akong acronym dyan eh. Ang tawag ko dyan, ang pag-usapang financial inclusion o usapang fintech. Ang acronym po dyan, PISIL. Alam mo yung PISIL?
Okay,
PISIL, di ba?
yes.
Alam mo yung ating mga manonood, yung mga namamalengke sa mga palengke, di ba? Yung pagkuha ng magandang quality ng paninda, yung pisil-pisilin mo, di ba? Kung ito ba ay ito ba hinog na, hilaw ba to, ito ba bilasana, etc. Dito naman sa fintech, ang tawag ko dyan, PISIL. It involves payments, investments, savings, insurance, at loans or lending. So ito yung komposisyon ng lahat ng mga serbisyo ng fintech or ng digital. Kumbaga, hindi lang ito na nalilimitahan nga sa payments lang. Kasi pinag-usapan natin puro e-wallets o mga banks, di ba? But in fact, pag pinag-usapan natin yung ano ba yung successful state, how can we say that our initiative or our objectives or our goal of having to have inclusive digital finance or having to bank the unbanked and underserved would be treated or would be ranked as successful or would be classified as successful. Alam mo, hindi lang to payments. Sabi nga natin, dapat ang isang Pilipino, meron siyang gamit na, ito nga, digital payments, meron siyang insurance, may investment siya, may savings siya, at meron siyang, syempre, kailangan niya ng credit access, di ba? That's why, karamihan sa ating mga Pilipino na nabibiktima pa rin ng mga loan sharks, di ba? Yung mga 5-6, di ba? Yung mga dyan 5-7 sa sobrang taas ng interest, di ba?
So meron, ayun, di ko ba narinig yun? So may 5-7 pala.
May 5-7 sa sobrang taas ng interest, di ba? So kaya nga, in fact, yan din yung isang mga pinag-uusapan ngayon sa Senado, yung about digital loans, di ba? Na, in fact, sa Fintech Alliance, meron kaming mga hindi inaprobahang application for membership at meron din kaming mga in-expel or sinuspend ng mga existing members na online lending companies na may mga unethical collection practices or matatawag mong masyadong nagsasamantala sa ating mga negosyante o sa mga MSMEs na nagpapatong na napakalalaking interest, di ba? At yung sabi natin, yung unethical collection practices na tatawagan yung kamag-anak mo, mga kaibigan mo na, itong si ganito, hindi nagbabayad, etc. So, may coercion or merong pananakot na actually ay illegal at hindi inaalaw ng ating batas. So that's why kami sa Fintech Alliance, kami ay katulong ng BSP at ng SEC upang masiwata at lalo pa nating mapaigting yung kampanya laban sa mga mapanamantalang mga fintech players na yan. No? So sabi nga natin, gusto natin na walang elemento o mga bad elements o bulok na kamatis na maisama doon sa bunch of good players. That's why sabi natin doon sa Manila Tech Summit, yung 4T framework na Tech for Good, Tech for All, Tech for Growth, those are the 4 T's that we have, no? Na yung framework namin to make sure na lahat ng players in the industry. Alam mo, ang Fintech Alliance po ay na-establish noong 2017 mula sa 5 corporate members noong 2017. Ngayon po ay lumobo na to ng more than 140 corporate members collectively generating more than 95% of all retail digital financial transaction volume in the Philippines. Kaya kasamang CSR, ito na yung the force to reckon with. Kaya alam mo, binabasa naming mga draft bills ng both the Senate and the House at yung mga draft regulations ng BSP, ng SEC. They would normally send us copies of those drafts. Binabasa namin yon for our appreciation, and of course, we also have to provide our inputs, our suggestions, our comments, and we are normally being invited also sa mga public hearings, no? Kaya, kumbaga, well-represented yung industry in so far as having to craft these pieces of legislation and, of course, enabling regulations that would further encourage players to further innovate for inclusion.
May data kaming nakita, 44% of adults remain unbanked. So, galing to sa BSP. Dahil daw sa fintech, nabibridge nito yung banking, payments, and investments basta may smartphone ka na. At dahil siyempre, ang MSMEs, 99% nito ay bumubuo sa businesses in the country. So, tama ba yung data namin o parang yung 44% na yon talagang lumiliit pa ba? Go ahead.
Well, in fact, yung nagkaroon ng Digital Payments Transformation Roadmap na goal ang BSP, no? Ito, they had twin goals, no? They had 2 goals. One is to convert at least 50% of retail financial transactions to digital and onboard at least 50% of adult Filipinos to the formal financial system by end of 2023. So the good news is that only one of those 2 goals has been achieved, no? And that is having to convert at least 50% of retail financial transactions to digital. In fact, ngayon, nasa 52.8% na tayo ng retail financial transactions na digital format na. But work in progress pa rin yung having to onboard 50% of adult Filipinos. Kaya doon ko sinabi during the Manila Tech Summit, yung 80 by 80 agenda, kung saan 80% of retail financial transactions will now be in the form of digital, and 80% of adult Filipinos to have transactional accounts by 2028. So 80 by 80 by 2028. So ito ngayon ay yung commitment ng buong industriya na kasama ang gobyerno upang lalo pang mapaigting yung paggamit ng digital platforms. Kasi alam natin na sa Pilipinas, we are archipelago, we have geographically isolated in disadvantaged areas, yung mga, especially yung mga remotest island barangays, etc., na wala naman talagang mga branch ng bangko or mga payment service providers, pero may hawak silang smartphones. Alam naman natin, di ba, kasamang Cesar, na ang Pilipinas ay number 1. Dati, number 1 tayo sa SMS, di ba? We generate 1 billion
Yes.
SMS a day. Ngayon,
Tatandaan ko pa yan dito.
di ba? Oo.
Panahon ko yan.
Nakwento lang sa akin. So, ngayon, number 1 pa rin ng Pilipinas, ang mga Pilipino, when it comes to social media, no? Tayo yung pinakamaraming social media post at pinaka-engaged sa internet. So, kumbaga, hindi lang dapat natin gamitin ang mga platforms na ito sa mga pagpo-post ng kung ano-ano, but I think it's really more about having to leverage these technologies to better our lives, di ba? Parang for the betterment of society, kaya sabi natin tech for good, para to make sure that we can make use of these technologies for businesses, in uplifting our lives, and of course, having to have our livelihood as well.
When you said this is a goal by 2028, is this realistic somehow, Lito? Kasi siyempre, ngayon, 2025 na. Katatapos lang ng election, pero parang akala mo, lapit-lapit na. I don't wanna talk about politics, but Lito, di ba, we both know that, isang pikit lang, di ba?
Election na ulit.
Election na ulit. So, is this realistic? One of the question here is that what counts as a digital transactional account and how will you measure progress? At kanino bang scoreboard yon? Sa'yo ba, Fintech Alliance ba, BSP ba, or third party ba?
It boils down to having to have, sabi natin yung BHAG, di ba? Big, audacious, hairy goals, di ba? Parang ayaw mo namang mag-set ng goal na kaya mo namang agad-agad makuha. Kasi dapat gusto natin, it has to be something na talagang audacious or something big, something significant, no? Kasi gusto mo talagang makuha lahat yung populasyon na maitawid natin sila sa digital. Now, yung tanong mo na kaninong metric ba yan? Is it for Fintech Alliance, BSP ba yan, or kanino bang ahensya ng pamahalaan dapat mag-deliver niyan? As I've said, it's a whole-of-nation approach. It has to be done by all parties, by all stakeholders. Kasi, alam mo, ang dami na nating ginawang progressive initiatives together with the government, no? So, in fact, pati yung having to exit the Philippines from the FATFA gray list, having to delist the Philippines from the EU list very recently, kasama ang Fintech Alliance din doon. So, making sure na kasama tayo sa lahat ng mga inisyatibo ng pamahalaan. In fact, kung makikita mo yung Philippine Development Plan, no, under the current administration up to 2028, nakalagay doon ang pangalang Fintech Alliance under SEC, kung saan there must be 258 fintech companies operating in the Philippines by 2028. So binigay yung assignment na yun sa Fintech Alliance. In fact, we are very proud to tell the public that we were able to achieve that over 258 fintech companies operating in the Philippines 2 years in advance.
Wow.
So, nakita rin natin kung gaano kainteresado ang mga mamumuhunan sa Pilipinas at kung paano nagiging nakita natin na ang Philippines is poised to become a $1 trillion economy by 2033. And we have seen also the influx of investments into the Philippines and having to also, do business in the country. And this also goes to show how the Philippine government has been, especially our economic managers, no, in terms of having to provide enabling regulatory framework, enabling business environment for all our investors, no. Ang aspiration din natin is to have more unicorn fintech companies in the Philippines. Alam mo, sa Pilipinas, dalawa pa lang yan, no? GCash and Maya. But we want more because in Southeast Asia, nakita man natin, Singapore, ang dami, ang Malaysia, ang dami, Indonesia, marami. So we also want Philippines to have more than 10, no?
But speaking of other countries dito, siyempre, kayo, nabe-benchmark nyo rin yung Pilipinas
Yes.
sa neighboring countries natin. How do you assess or how does fintech in the Philippines fare us with the other countries?
Alam mo, pagdating sa fintech quotient or digital quotient, ang taas ng Pilipinas. No? So, if you are to measure based on other KPIs, no, in terms of adoption, etc., hindi naman nahuhuli ang Pilipinas. No? But definitely, there are other economies that are more advanced, no? Like Singapore, for example, or even Thailand or Indonesia, in Malaysia. But again, gusto natin sabihin sa mga manonood natin na all of these platforms are now available. It is a matter of having our kababayan make use of it, no, for business, for for their own livelihood. Kasi nandito na lahat yan, di ba? Naghihintay na lang siyang gamitin ng ating mga kababayan. Isa sa mga in-announce din natin sa Manila Tech Summit ay yung countdown natin for the ASEAN Tech Summit in 2026. Kasi alam naman natin na ang Pilipinas po ay magiging host no? At chairman ng ASEAN Summit next year, no? Sa 2026. So, kumbaga, lalo pa nating i-showcase no? Ang Pilipinas sa ating mga kapitbahay sa ASEAN. Isa sa pinakabentahin ng ating bansa ay having to have the very young median age, no? At 24 years old, di ba? So, napakabata ng ating populasyon at ito actually ang kinakaingitan naman ng ibang mga bansa na alam natin yung mga population aging is a political, social, economic concern of most countries. Like for example, Japan, di ba? Na kung saan kaya marami silang gustong mga papuntahing mga ibang nasyonalidad sa kanilang bansa, di ba? Canada as well is another thing. Kasi ang human capital is very relevant and significant resource, no, in ensuring the sustainability of one country's progress, no. So that's why we have to make sure na we have to have those digital talents, those talents that are really world-class. No? That's why isa rin sa mga pinag-usapan namin kasama si Secretary Henry Aguda ay on how we can generate at least additional 8 million digital talents by 2028. No? In fact, hindi lang to sa mga business process outsourcing, mga BPOs or mga call centers, but also yung mga pag-generate or pag-develop ng mga AI engineers or mga data scientists or data architects, data engineers. These are the key jobs or talents that the world would be needing in the next 5-10 years. We're now in the era of AI, yung artificial intelligence. We're not even talking about quantum computing yet, no? Sabi nga natin, ang daming mag-disrupt na mga jobs, di ba? Because of the emergence of AI. But it's really more about upscaling, retooling, reskilling of our existing skills, di ba? Of our talents, making sure that we are abreast with the with the current developments. Should not be confined with our comfort zones. Dapat we have to always challenge ourselves to be better, to be advanced, to be always ahead of competition. So, yun yung ating siguro suggestion. Now that this show is all about open for business, these technologies, these platforms are open for business. It's really more for our Filipinos, for our kababayan who are negosyante or mga business-minded or business owners who would now be able to leverage the importance or benefits or significance of having to have the benefits of digital. So, kumbaga, lahat po ng itong mga platapormang ito ay na-available na at ito ay para po sa inyong lahat na pagkakitaan at magkaroon ng magandang buhay gamit po ang ating mga digital technologies.
Lito, I'll go back to what you also presented. It's a 4T framework. Tech for good, tech for growth, tech for all, tech for trust. Ano yung pinakamahirap dito na gawin?
Tech for trust, which is actually the most critical, the most important, and the most sensitive, right? Paano mo maiengganyo yung mga tatay natin, nanay natin, yung lolo at lola natin, di ba? Mga may edad ng konti, di ba? Mga medyo senior citizen. Surprisingly, ang nagtuturo sa kanila ay yung kanilang mga apo, di ba?
Okay.
So,
mga Gen Zs na.
Mga Gen Zs na. So, in fact, the best teacher sa mga senior citizens, no, sa mga lolo at lola natin, ay yung mga apo nila. And in fact, they trust their apos, di ba? That's why, sabi ko kanina, ito yung isang bagay na talagang pinapangalagaan namin ng aming mga buhay namin at aming mga careers, di ba? Making sure na talagang ang tiwala ng ating publiko, ng ating mga consumers ay 100% to make sure na talagang lahat ng kanilang mga transaksyon, it being financial ay dapat lang na pangprotektahan ng ating mga industry players. That's why highly regulated ang mga financial service providers, di ba, ng BSP, ng SEC, at kasama na dyan ng AMLC, di ba? Kaya alam natin na sabi nga na ni Governor Eli Remolona ng BSP, having to exit the gray listing is one thing, but having to keep us off the list is another thing. No? So making sure that we have to enshrine amongst all industry players yung strict governance, no, on how we can avoid proliferation financing or anti-money laundering or this AML FATFA concerns, di ba? Making sure that every player in the industry is well aware of their fiduciary responsibility, making sure that we always protect the interests of our consumers.
Of all the things that makes fintech important, I have a list here, which you discussed earlier na financial inclusion, convenience and efficiency, lower costs, innovation in services, better customer experience, global reach. Sa lahat ng importance ng fintech na ito, ako interesado doon sa lower costs, where digital solutions reduce overhead costs, often leading to cheaper services compared to traditional banking. Alam ko, you represent one of the biggest digital banks here in the country.
Yeah.
How are traditional banks adapting?
I was able to come up with a term, no? I called it phygital, no? Physical Digital Blended Banking Experience.
Physical, digital,
blended banking experience.
Okay.
That's why I call it phygital. No?
Okay.
It's a combination.
Phygital.
It's a
Okay.
fusion. It's a fusion of physical and digital. Because alam mo, at the height of Yolanda, I was with a telco company pa that time. No? We were in Tacloban the day after the Yolanda super typhoon. No? In fact, yung nakita namin doon na talagang gagabayan mo pa rin yung mga tao. Even paggamit nga ng ATM, talagang yung iba nga doon, yung kita namin nakapila sila, yung mga lola at lolo, kinakausap yung ATM. No, sabi ko, Lola, hindi ko sasagot yan. So, kumbaga, talagang gagabayan mo sila. That's why I even had to come up with that statement that we are not aspiring to have a cashless society. What we are aspiring for is to have a cash-light regime. So, cash will still be there. So, why is it that even up to this time, we still have that cash in, cash out? Di ba? O, cash in, cash out ka kay GCash, cash in, cash out ka kay Maya, and other banks as well. So, that's why in the Philippine context, we are saying that it is in a phygital regime through a cash-light stance. No? So, kumbaga, sabi natin, hindi talaga siya cashless. Hindi talaga siya totally digital. Kasi meron pa ring blending of both the cash or the physical and the digital. Ang component kasi ng phygital is what we call financial education. Sa financial education, hindi magtitiwala yung tao na agad-agad mo siyang sasabihin, ito ang gagawin nyo, etc. Kasi dapat maintindihan niya ang journey, di ba? From the time na makuha niya yung pera niya, from the time na at mailabas niya yung pera niya, di ba? Kasi nangyayari minsan, pumasok yung pera niya digitally, di ba? Ilalabas naman niya na in cash. Magka-cash out siya. Tapos pagbibili siya ng kung ano man. So parang hindi nasasanay sila doon sa pumasok digitally yung pera, nasa wallet niya o nasa bank account niya. Pero ang dapat, ang pagbayad din niya, digitally na rin. Kaya ang nangyari, pupunta sa ATM, mag-withdraw, o punta sa cash out center para kumuha ng cash. And yet, doon ang gagawin ng babayaran nyo kung anumang mga dapat bayaran. May gap pa rin doon that has to be resolved by way of financial education. Sabi ko nga, amongst the 40s within that framework that I mentioned or I shared with you, yung trust ang pinakamahalaga at importante. Kasi kung walang trust, you won't see growth, you won't see tech for all, you won't see tech for good. Ang core ng lahat ng ito ay yung trust. No? It all starts and ends with trust. At alam mo, meron akong acronym sa trust. Technology that is responsive, universal, secure, and transparent. So that is trust for you.
At kaya naman minsan nawawalan ng trust. Hindi naman minsan, maaring madalas. Kasi they hear of these
Horror stories.
They hear of this fraud. So, you announced, which is the next question, you announced an industry-led fraud bureau and an KYC registry at the summit. So, paano ba ito na-operate day-to-day? Who has access to data? What privacy safeguards are in place? How do you prevent data sharing from becoming a source of exclusion? Kasi kung wala itong mga horror stories
Yeah.
na to, mas maraming ang exposure sa social media ng horror story kaysa sa positive story.
Correct. Alam mo kasi, ang social media is powerful. Parang double-edged sword ang social media. Kasi it could amplify the message, di ba? Either for good or for bad, di ba? So, good sana kung maganda yung sinasabi, pero because of deepfakes na rin, because of misinformation or fake news, talagang na-amplify pa na negatively, di ba? So, tama yung sinabi mo na parang siyempre, yung hard-earned money mo, abay nawala, di ba? Na hindi mo nakita kung nasaan na nabudol ka, etc. Karamihan kasi ng mga kaso ngayon ng mga fraud, no, ay karamihan sa ating mga kababayan ay yung nabubudol nga, no, na nabibigay nila yung OTP, yung one-time password o one-time PIN nila. Kasi pareho-parehong boses, parang tumawag ng taga-bangko o taga...
At dito,
kung saan-
kahit na sikat na mga tao, nabubudol dyan.
Totoo,
diba?
totoo.
Hindi na parang, I know of a journalist or and a USEC na
Yes,
nabudol
oo.
na.
Well, hindi lang USEC. Ang dami, ang dami. You'll be surprised, no? Dahil marami pa rin tayong kaso rin ng mga mule accounts. Ano to yung mule accounts? Itong mule accounts na to, these are both legitimate and illegitimate accounts, no? Ito yung mga totoong accounts na talagang ng totoong tao. Unfortunately, for some Filipinos, dahil sa sobrang kapit sa patalim, binibenta nila yung kanilang profile, yung kanilang bank account or yung wallet account nila for 2,000 pesos or 5,000 pesos. Iba nga, 500 pesos lang, di ba? So, binibigay nila yung profile nila, na let's say, Juan de la Cruz, ito yung account number ko, etc. Yun ang gagamitin naman ng mga kriminal pagkuha ng kung anumang account. Pag chinek mo, legitimate accounts yon. Pero in fact, yun ay binenta ng legitimate individual para gamitin ng mga kriminal. Kaya ang aming pakiusap, ang aming apila sa ating mga kababayan, huwag nyo pong ibebenta o huwag nyo pong ibibigay ang inyong mga account numbers or bank account profiles ninyo sa kung kanino man. Kasi kung magkaroon ng kaso ng kriminal, pati kayo masasama madadawit dahil pangalan niyo po yun, profile po ninyo yun, and yet hindi nyo alam na ginamit sa masamang paraan.
What are the red flags, especially for consumers, MSMEs who are watching? How would you know?
Kasagsagan ng pogo, di ba? Marami ka nakikitang mga unsolicited SMS na tatanggap, di ba? Na unknown number na, congratulations, nanalo ka ng 1 million.
Yun.
I-click mo lang to para makuha mo yung premium mo. Or, congratulations, tanggap ka na sa trabaho mo, i-click mo lang to para makuha mo yung unang sweldo mo, etc. So, number one tanungin yung sarili nyo, nag-apply ba ako ng trabaho? Sumali ba ako sa isang raffle o pa-contest? Ang tanong nyo sarili nyo, pag meron kayong nakitang mga ganong mga messages sa inyong telepono at pinapaklik yung link na yon na too good to be true, pag ito ay yung mga balitang, alam nyo namang parang, kasi minsan yun doon nabubudol ang Pilipino, na parang yung get rich quick na, naku, ito na ata yung ano ko na hindi po yun ganon. So, unang-hunin yung isipin parate na ito ay too good to be true, hindi ito totoo, at i-block nyo po yung numero na yon at huwag nyo i-click. Ang rule natin ay anything na may nakita kayong clickable link sa inyong telepono, sa social media nyo man, or sa SMS nyo, or sa text message nyo, huwag nyo pong i-click yan. May it be in Viber, WhatsApp, Telegram, or Facebook, or Messenger, or SMS, na clickable link, huwag nyo pong i-click ang link. So, always think before you click.
Okay, wow. You know, even for, professionals, that happens. Okay, let's talk about inclusion, MSMEs, and outcomes. Lagi nating nababanggit ang digital inclusion. Beyond account opening, what does inclusion mean to you in 2026? Kasi, diba, when we talk of inclusion, it could be credit access, working capital products, digital bookkeeping. How will we see evidence of economic uplift through Fintech?
Okay, magandang tanong yan, no, kasamang Cesar. Kasi sabi nga natin, hindi lang ito tungkol sa access to payments, di ba? Or having to have a bank account digitally. Kakaibat ito yung, sabi natin, yung financial literacy na kung saan mayroong ang access to credit, di ba? Na kasi karamihan sa ating mga kababayan pa rin ay tinatawag nating new to bank at new to credit. Ano yung ibig sabihin ng new to bank? Ito yung new to bank, yung mga unbanked or underserved individuals na ngayon lang nagkaroon ng bank account or wallet account. At yun namang mga new to credit, ito naman yung mga Pilipino na never silang nagkaroon ng credit profile or credit footprint. No? Kaya karamihan sa ating mga credit institutions na bangko man yan or non-bank financing institutions, hindi sila mapautang kasi walang basihan kung saan pwedeng magkaroon ng credit scoring na tinatawag, di ba? Sa Fintech, sa tulong ng Fintech, meron na tayo tinatawag na alternative credit scoring providers na non-traditional credit scoring algorithm na kung saan pati yung iyong payment behavior, no? Let's say, kung nagbabayad ka ng bills mo sa kuryente, sa tubig, o sa mga kailangan mong bayaran. So, yun, nakikita ng sistema, ng digital platform yon. So, you now create alternative credit scoring algorithm na kung saan ito na magiging basihan or proxy sa tinatawag para makita natin na itong si Juan de la Cruz ay pwede na itong pautangin ng this much and this much. So, depende na yan sa risk appetite ng banko or non-bank financial institution. In fact, marami na tayo ngayong fintech players, in fact, members ng Fintech Alliance, na mga credit scoring companies and also online lending companies who are tapping into the unbanked or underserved communities or individuals na not necessarily being serviced by the banks.
This one is a good question as well. On merchant economics, many small merchants still prefer cash because of fees. So, especially in sari-sari stores where they shell out 10 pesos per 1,000 cash out. Complexity and settlement timing. What commercial interventions like pricing, instant settlement, microloans tied to transaction flows should fintechs and banks prioritize? Kasi meron pa rin talagang somehow they still prefer cash because there's top-up or fees involved.
Yes. Alam mo, yun ang magandang tanong din yan, no? Kasi maganda yung itong show mo na open for business kasi para maliwanagan din yung ating mga kabayang nagnenegosyo na akala nila cash is cheap. In fact, cash is so expensive. Alam mo, ang pag-store ng cash, ang pagtatransport ng cash, ang pag-secure ng cash, at pag-safe keep ng cash ay very expensive.
May cost din yan.
May cost yan, di ba? The mere fact na sa bahay ka, di ba, may negosyo ka, may sari-sari store ka, hindi mo alam kung saan lalagay yung cash mo, sa ilalim ba ng unan mo, sa loob ba ng lata ng biskwit, di ba? Alam mo sa sarili mo na hindi safe yung cash mo sa bahay mo, di ba? Kung wala sa bangko yan, etc. Hindi naman may pupunta ka sa bangko, for example, na para mag-deposito or mag-withdraw, etc. So that's why pati yung handling at yung transport of the cash is also expensive. Kaya nga pati yung mga armored vehicles, di ba? Nakita mo na, hindi naman yan diadala yung cash mo sa isang bag lang at mag-jeep ka o mag-taxi ka o magkokotse ka. Lahat yan ay talagang, sabi nga natin, cash is expensive. So, yun nakita nating digital channel na pagbayad, di ba? Bayad sa merchants, etc. Yung mga bayad doon o mga fees, di ba, is very affordable and very reasonable because making sure that your money is secured. Kumbaga, safe yun. Parang to make sure na lahat ng magbabayad sa'yo or mga customers mo magbabayad either using RCBC or either using cards or either using bank transfers, ang dami mong options on how you would be able to be paid, no? On how you would be able to receive those payments. And that is through those digital formats or digital platforms. Now, sure ka naman na pagdating mo sa cellphone mo, check mo na ngayon yung in real time, lahat ng payments sa'yo, na nakalatag lahat doon. And one thing with digital is, it is transparent, di ba? So, kumbaga, what you see is what you get. Kumbaga, hindi yan tipo bang wala ka ng problemahin, naku, baka may kumupit ng pera sa akin or may kulang sa pagbibilang. At syempre, di ba, yung hirap magbilang ng coins, di ba, etc. So ito, lahat ng ito ay up to the last centavo accounted for. Kasi nga, there is so much transparency, there's so much accountability and audit trail ang binibigay sa atin na benepisyo ng pagiging digital.
In terms of how we position fintech in the international market, Fintech Alliance is now showcasing the Philippines at Singapore Fintech Festival and building a Philippine pavilion. What's the pitch to foreign fintech investors and partners? Is the Philippines a hub for consumer payments, remittances, regtech, or something else? Or yan na rin ba yung sinasabi mo na kailangan may higitan natin yung dalawang unicorn? We get more, invest more, and investors to come in.
We call it the Bagong Pilipinas, the Philippines Country Pavilion at the Singapore Fintech Festival. In fact po, ang SFF or ang Singapore Fintech Festival is the world's biggest tech event, no? Attended by over 65,000 participants from over 135 countries worldwide. And in fact, the Philippine Pavilion is the second largest pavilion after Singapore, who is actually the host country. This is actually our third year in mounting the Bagong Pilipinas Philippines Country Pavilion by the Fintech Alliance. Last year, we had the president virtually to open the country pavilion. And of course, in person, we had Her Majesty Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, who happens to be the United Nations Special Advocate for Financial Health at the country pavilion. So this year, we will have it on the 10th anniversary of the Singapore Fintech Festival, Singapore Expo on November 12 to 14. We hope that the President would be physically present to open that country pavilion together with our government partners as well as other private sector collaborators in that 3-day festival to again showcase the Philippines as the best digital hub in the region. And that is also very timely given the fact that the Philippines, again, as I've said, will host the ASEAN Summit next year. So this is a prelude in November towards that major regional event happening next year with Philippines as the chair of the ASEAN Summit. Sa lahat po ng mga gusto pang magtanong tungkol sa Fintech or sa Fintech Alliance, pwede po kayong mag-email sa aming secretariat at fintechalliance.ph. Meron din po kaming Facebook, ang Fintech Alliance.ph at LinkedIn. Asahan po namin ng inyong mga tanong, suhestyon at mga iba pa pong mga concerns tungkol po sa Fintech or digital.
And our buzzword of the week is Banking as a Service, or BaaS. BaaS allows non-banks, fintech companies, or non-financial firms to offer core financial services to their customers by integrating with banks via application programming interfaces or APIs. And with that, our quote for the week is this: the financial system is being rewired and fintech is the wire. That's according to Jim Marus, fintech author and speaker. Maraming salamat sa isang oras na pagsama sa amin, Lito. Maraming salamat sa iyo at sa ating mga manonood na tumunghay sa isang makabuluhang usapan ukol sa negosyo. Dito lang sa Open for Business. Hanggang sa susunod na linggo, samahan nyo kaming muli dito sa Open for Business. Catch us too on Facebook and YouTube. Like and subscribe on our social media page at Net25TV. We will bring you more insights from industry experts, thought leaders, CEOs, and featured SMEs. Together, let us help encourage business development in the Philippines. Sharpen your business acumen, feel the pulse, and set the trend for as long as you're informed and open for business. Ito po si Cesar Vallejos. Marami pong salamat.